Kjerag. That's how you spell Kjerag. Turns out. We have finally gotten the normal Kjerag on our hands. And I think this might actually be the most requested shoe of, I don't know, in the history of conversational pace. What do you think?
I would say so. And I've also been surprised, especially you and I were both at Tushers this weekend, surprised to see so much normal branding amongst the runners. I saw a couple Kjerags on feet. I saw some normal hats out there, some normal tees. It's just interesting to see a new brand in the space take off, even at these really local type races.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely been surprised at how many like normals I've seen, across mountain races this summer. Usually it takes 2 or 3 years, for, I don't know if I want to say the shoe's gone like mainstream, but normally it takes a few years for them to just be on a lot of feet, and it's taken less than one, and that's really impressive. Just with, I think there's already been a lot of positive buzz, but about this shoe. But I think we're here to dive into it. We've put the miles on. We've
Yep.
done we've done some good testing. These shoes were provided to us by Normal and Running Warehouse, but we're under no financial obligation to say whether we like a shoe or not.
All right. So we were short on time earlier when we recorded our shoe review, so I am recording the stats separately. This shoe is astonishingly light. My size 9.5 came in at 8 ounces on the dot, and that's 8 ounces with dirt. So extremely light shoe. The only shoe that we had that was lighter was the Hoka Zinal 2 that came in at 7.8 ounces. The stack of this shoe was 17.5 millimeters in the forefoot and 23.5 millimeters in the heel, which brings it to a 6 millimeter drop. The price comes in at $195. Moving on to the materials, the upper of the shoe is a very simple one-piece matrix upper. As with matrix uppers that were on some Hoka and Solomon shoes, this one is very similar. I feel like they all have their own slight spin to the actual texture of the material, but at the base of it, it's Kevlar woven mesh that's very strong, very light, very thin. It drains well. It's pretty breathable. Doesn't have any stretch to it. So I totally understand why Killian went with this material for the upper. There is a thin overlay that goes around all the way around the base of the shoe. There's some additional overlay around the toe bumper, which gives it kind of a mild amount of protection. It's not fully rigid, but if you kick something, it might protect your toe. Another unique part about this upper is the heel cup and the ankle collar. It's actually fairly structured and pretty rigid. So there is a full, rigid heel cup in here and a generous amount of padding all the way around. Not something that I've seen in recent shoes that are like within this weight class. So pretty cool to see a pretty normal heel cup here. The tongue is super thin, super floppy. It actually is like two materials kind of welded together. So the top material that's, facing outside almost feels like a fake leather type material. And then right on the underside that goes up against your foot is a very thin mesh. There's no additional padding. Yeah, really no funny business going on here. It didn't move around at all. So I guess these materials were there for a reason. It's gusseted right around the midfoot. The wrap is, a couple inches wide. It goes right around the arch. That keeps the tongue in place. But again, super simple, not too much going on. The midsole it's a foam. It's called X Pure. Again, they got two letters at the front. I don't feel like they needed to be there, but I guess that's on brand. X Pure foam. Anyways, it's immediately upon putting it on, I was like, this is not regular foam. What I've learned was that it's an EVA. It's a supercritical EVA. It's a nitrogen infused foam, which is very similar to what Brooks has used in some of their trail shoes, like the Catamount 2. And what I heard was that Normal actually wanted a supercritical EVA instead of a full P-Bax based like plastic full-blown super foam, because this type of foam actually felt a little bit better on the trail, which is something that we've been kind of saying kind of this whole time, where we're like, we're still not quite bought in on full-blown super foams on the trails. And at least for the first generation of this Nnormal Kjerag, they opted for just a supercritical EVA. What I also learned was that there was a thin plate in the shoe, something I feel like is not getting advertised or talked about that much. And I don't know exactly how much surface area, the plate is actually covering underfoot. But when running, you can definitely feel that there's like a suspicious amount of rock protection, probably for the reason of that plate, turns out. There's also a good amount of stiffness in the back, 2/3 of the shoe around the midfoot and the heel. With how little foam there is in the shoe shouldn't be this stiff in the back 2/3, but in the forefoot, it's very thin and flexible. But I imagine this is probably a lot like the Salomon Sensafilm plate, where it still allows you to feel the ground very much, but will protect against, the biggest of rock hits. Moving on to the outsole, we've got kind of what we probably all expected. It's a Vibram Mega Grip outsole on their light base. We're looking 3.5 millimeter lugs and a lug pattern that is very much in that all-terrain category. So going to be pretty good at most things, which, at the end of the day, this was supposed to be a do-it-all shoe. We'll get into that a little bit later. Those are all the stats. And we'll get back to the review now.
Finn, what kind of mileage did you put on this shoe?
I put 116 miles on this shoe. It varied from, as per usual, the Bonneville Shoreline Trail outside of Salt Lake City. Did a lot of ski resort miles at Snowbird and Elta on fairly technical terrain. I had it on my feet as I was watching you out in the Tushers Mountains race that 70K. All in all, I really tried to put it into every single possible environment that I could, under every single condition that I could, because as you and I both know, this shoe has been billed as a shoe that can handle everything with excellence.
Yeah, I did the same. So I only squeaked out 80 miles on my pair. I was thinking it would be a little over 100. The main reason why it's 80 instead of 100 was I did run the Tushers 70K last weekend in the Kjerag, but I did end up changing my shoes after 50K. We'll get into that a little bit later. But even with those first 30 miles of the race, as well as about 50 training miles, I definitely got to take the shoe through almost all of it. I mean, I hit, the buffed out, non-technical, dry, dusty single track in Ashland, Oregon. But then I also got to get in some big mountain running. That Tushers course is, it's one of the best courses out there, especially that 70K. Oh, yeah. You got some big mountain exposure. Some spots were really technical. There was some big like shale-y sections, some other spots where you're just going down on some big rock slabs. But then there was also some pretty cruisy sections too. And with how much snow there was still on the course, I got to run across some snowfields, some boggy marshes. So I actually went through the mud. And I got in a lot of hiking. There's a lot of hiking on that course. So yeah, I really got to experience all of it. What did you think? I guess one of the biggest things that, a lot of people have already talked about that I guess we can really confirm is the sizing. You went down a half size?
Down half a size, which was appropriate. Without a doubt, that was the right. I am normally a 12, size down to an 11.5. That was definitely the right choice.
Yeah. I also went down to a 9.5. And for ultras and most of my general training, 9.5 was perfect. I could totally see myself going down even to a 9 for sub ultra racing to get an even more precise fit, because even with a 9.5, I still had over a half size of length at the front.
Interesting.
So I could have gone down even smaller, and that's because my 10 is normally like almost too big, but that's just the way I prefer my shoes. So I think for pretty much everyone, you're going down either a half size or even a full size if you normally wear your shoes a little big or have lower volume, narrower feet. The fit was interesting. I was surprised because this is it's a pretty minimal shoe. Like it's very simple. There's not too much going on. Um, and normally shoes like that, I guess we like even like the Hoka Zinal and like the S Lab Pulsar, somewhat narrower fitting shoes. The Zinal gave us a little bit more room, but especially, coming from like the S Lab Pulsar. I mean, I know that's definitely a shoe that lines up in a lot of similar categories as this Kjerag. This one was definitely more generously fitting across the forefoot. Did you have any width issues?
I didn't have any width issues, but one thing I will say about the fit, this was the second hardest shoe that we've reviewed so far in our lineup for me to comfortably get into. The only other comparison I have is the Naked TR that we reviewed a while back. It had sort of like that same struggle that you have with hockey skates or ski boots, sometimes soccer cleats. I had a really hard time mindlessly getting into this shoe. I had to be super intentional, like holding the upper up while simultaneously pulling back the heel collar. Once I got in and I got into like the spot that the shoe wanted my foot to be in, it worked. But it's not one of those shoes that you can easily flip on.
No, it's like the materials inside the shoe are grippy, which
Yes, that's a
and
perfect way to
and
put it.
and the shoe is it's Euro laced. So all the eyelets, like the laces, go in to the eyelets instead of coming out, which I like and I dislike. I like it because you can make a much more secure, precise fit because the laces come in and like actually wrap on like around your foot more. Whereas if it's going the other way, the eyelets push a lot of the outside of the upper on your foot, so you can get a more precise fit. But man, it sucks to lace and unlace. You have to be so
I know.
finicky with it. So yeah, you definitely, yeah, I like what you said. You have to be very intentional when you're putting the shoe on. I think also that just having such a minimal tongue, like it's just going to fold over, and also it's
Yep.
grippy. I guess maybe that's another thing. I've mentioned in the materials, but the shoe has no insole.
No.
I
Yeah.
really liked it. I loved the lack of insole. Um,
What do you see as the
how
benefits there?
just one less thing to break. Like in my Silver State 50 mile where I wore the Kiger, my shoes got soaked and the insoles folded over and started moving around. And ultimately that like really jacked my feet up. Traditionally, the insole was there to provide a little bit more squish because as we all know, it's that step in feel that sells shoes. So whether the shoe's even cushioned or not, if you have a squishy insole, you're more likely to sell it. I don't think Killian or Nnormal cares about that at all because they're going for pure performance. And the stitching underneath the insole that would hold, the upper and the midsole together, it used to be very rough. Oftentimes it would go straight down the center of the shoe. There used to be like harder, firmer materials that you just need an insole or else your feet would get super jacked up. The way most shoes are constructed now, like you don't need that anymore. Like the materials, sometimes it's just the exposed foam right under or even a softer layer. So what Killian essentially did was like make sure that the foam that the upper sews into is soft enough that your foot can lie right on top of it. And they used thin enough stitching where, I didn't feel it or notice it at all. And then, when we're getting into Killian's mind here, we're saving probably 15 to 20 grams per shoe of insole weight. And it's just one less thing to get in the way. You also get to sit your foot a couple millimeters lower to the ground.
Yes.
So like from a
Yep.
performance standpoint, like I get it. And I really liked it.
Could we talk a bit about the upper? I have just a few thoughts.
Yeah. Let's
Um,
let's let's do it.
I know you're going to go through the tech, but Matrix upper obviously, goes with the whole description of being very lightweight and durable. Um, One thing I thought that was interesting about this shoe, I am somebody who has broader feet. I feel like there is enough room in the toe box of this shoe for comfort for these longer days. I do think if you have broader feet like I do, you will do better in a Serac than you would do in like an S Lab Sense or the Pulsar series shoes. Um, I did notice a little bit of creasing though towards the front of the shoe. I talked about how it was hard to get into. This was actually the first shoe that I had a little bit of lace bite on. I didn't even know what the feeling was that I was experiencing until I Googled it and typed it in, and it turns out that that's lace bite. I was feeling that for some reason. But also the breathability is great. I ran in temps in the 90s and 100s in this shoe in Salt Lake City. They felt very airy, very well vented, got them wet a few times on some creek crossings. They dried out quickly when they got wet. The one other thing I like in this upper that I think is, I don't know if it's unique, but I haven't personally experienced it in a lighter shoe, is that laminated section near the top of the toe box for extra rock protection. I did bang around in these shoes a little bit, and I actually like in real time experienced the benefit of that. So I'm kind of half and half on the upper. There are parts I didn't like, and there's parts that I liked, and that leaves me a bit confused.
Yeah, I mean, I think Matrix material at the moment is just the best upper material out there. It's like, what is your favorite upper of any shoe, and why is it Matrix? uh, what what I really like about the Matrix is the fact that it has zero stretch at all. I mean, once you're in and you tie it down, you're locked in and it doesn't change. I mean, when I raced Tushers, like I ran in it for 6 hours, and over the course of those 6 hours, I climbed and descended, I think about 9,000 feet, and I didn't touch the shoes once. Kind of like you had said, though, with the creasing, I still don't think you need Matrix upper across the top of the forefoot. So Hoka has done this where the Evo Speed Go, the Evo Mafate Speed 2, and I think now the current Tecton X, I'd actually have to look and see. They don't have Matrix going all the way over the forefoot. They have a stretchy, like more minimal piece of fabric to go over, because you just don't need the Matrix material there. You're not negatively impacting the structural integrity of the shoe by cutting out some of the Matrix upper there. And the reason for that is because it creases over. The original Evo Mafate had full Matrix over the forefoot, and it also had a crease that, like, fortunately though, with the normals, even though it creased, it didn't bug me. Like, it creased in the correct spot for my foot, and I didn't have any issues, and I don't see myself having issues. But if that hit my toes or the tops of my toes in the wrong spot, it would be an immediate deal breaker, which is kind of a bummer, because that's not really one of those things that you can like try on and figure out in the store. It's one of those things that you would figure out if it didn't work for you after about 50 miles. So in regards to buying the shoe, like, that is the slight gamble I would say you're going to take. But I've heard more people than not having no issue with it. And I think that's probably a contributor to, or the non-stretch of the Matrix upper, that's going to be a contributor to the potential lace bite, because this is an easy shoe to over tighten. One thing that I thought was unique about this shoe was, for a shoe that's like, what I would say somewhat minimal, like by today's standard, it's a pretty minimal shoe. It has a very structured heel in terms of like the heel counter, which I really liked. Like, that we see the Solomon, the S-Lab Pulsar, the Hoka Zinal, similar shoes in terms of weight and amounts of cushion, floppy heel counters and no support there. And I always we're like, why is that, when we're ultimately going to be taking these shoes on technical, fast terrain? Whereas the Normal puts on like a pretty beefy heel cup with a generous amount of padding. And for those reasons, I just felt like I had so much more control in this shoe than some of the other lightweight trail racers out there.
Yeah. And it's funny, like, to that same point, we can't say this is a max cushion shoe just based on the numbers that you see outlined on their website, but gram for gram, this shoe will go farther than any other similar trail shoe in its category. This is like also a max cushion. This is the most max cushion lightweight shoe I think I've ever used.
It's the most maximal minimal shoe we've ever worn. But like, that actually is kind of how I describe the shoe. It kind of breaks the brain, because, I think let's get into the feel underfoot a little bit. When I first put the shoe on, I was so skeptical, because like, just walking around, it feels low to the ground, very light, like about as much cushion as a Pulsar. And I was like, there is no way I'm running anything over 10 miles in the shoe, because it's so thin. Like, I will break my foot. Of course, Killian can run a 100-miler in it. It's Killian. Killian could run a UTMB barefoot and he would be just fine. Everyone who's wearing this shoe saying you could run long distances in it is full of crap. But then I went for a couple longer runs in it, and And I was like, how is this possible? How is a shoe this low to the ground? And like, because there's not that much foam in the forefoot. Like it kind of, I know, did yours kind of feel like right out of the box, it had some squish, but then after about 15 to 20 miles, I thought it like very much like
Exactly.
packed in.
Exactly. Yes.
Which I thought was going to be horrible. But then it actually packed in like for the better. And then from miles 20 to 80, it did not change at all. And I think that's now what a lot of people are describing, where it's like, yeah, I have 400 miles on them and it hasn't changed. I think that's because you kind of pack in the foam after like 20 miles, but then it just stays like that. But even then, I was still so skeptical. I was like, how am I getting this good of rock protection? And what we learned, there is actually a very thin plate in the shoe, which totally makes sense. Like Solomon's Sensafilm, which is like, it's a plate not for propulsion or anything like that. It's not even like a hard plate for full rock protection. It's like a silencer where like you're still going to like feel the rocks, but you just feel them less. It like mutes them out just a little bit so you don't actually like really jack up your foot. Because I think a rigid rock plate would take away from the ground feel, and then you wouldn't feel nearly as nimble. So with that thin plate, which actually does give some stiffness to the back half of the shoe, another thing I really liked, with the amount of foam that was underfoot, plus that thin plate, plus the full length Vibram outsole, I was able to run significantly longer in the shoe than I thought.
Maybe, and I have more thoughts on the midsole, but did you want to talk a bit about the reasoning why you ultimately switched out of the shoe 50K into Tushers? Is that relevant here?
Yeah. So I had enough confidence to at least start the race in the normal, and I had a crew at the 50K mark in case I wanted to change. And ultimately, really, like, I think had I been having a really good day, I would have not changed my shoes and kept going because my feet actually felt fine. I didn't have any of that like just soreness on the bottom of your feet from just a long time standing, which I normally get in a lot of shoes after about 6 hours. I actually didn't get it in the normals. Descending in the normals was incredible. Like I felt like Killian out there. I was just like tiptoeing and jumping down. I mean, we saw each other at the very highest point of the course, and we were all wearing our normals, and it like was probably the perfect shoe to get up that mountain. I was descending down to the 50K mark. I was just starting to lose steam. Like I was getting to that point where I'm like, oh crap, like we're getting into survival mode here. Like the altitude of the day was just finally starting to catch up to me. And I just felt like I wanted to put on a little bit more substantial shoe to protect my feet and my ankles because I knew I was about to start getting sloppier. So that's the main reason why I changed my shoes. If I had been having a perfect day, I wouldn't have changed. But because I was starting to falter a little bit, I switched into the S-Lab Ultra 3s, which I would say also overlap a lot with the normal Kjerag, but they are, thicker, denser, a little bit more protection. And it was like the perfect shoe for the last 25 miles of the course.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like this shoe is billed as being able to go all distances, but I think maybe in your case, definitely in my case, I feel like because the starting weight of this shoe is so low, you could add a few extra millimeters of that midsole foam and it would still retain all of the marketing qualities that they want to promote. And I think it would just extend the distance range for more above average to average runners who, like, even if the day does start to go south or it's not quite like the peak day that they were hoping for, you can still like use the shoe in let's just ride it out or survival category type runs.
The normal Kjerag is not a survival mode kind of shoe. It's I'm having a really good day sort of shoe, which with the rock protection and everything, I totally understand how someone like Killian ran in that shoe at UTMB and Hard Rock. It's just kind of like how we had said with the Ultrafly. It's not a blow up friendly shoe, but if you're having a great day, it can totally work. One thing though that is interesting is their other shoe model, the Tomer. I don't know if I'm saying that right at all, but so it doesn't use the matrix upper, and it's a normal EVA foam. It's not the same supercritical EVA that's in the Kjerag. If that Tomer had the supercritical EVA and just the matrix upper, I think that would be exactly the shoe that you're looking for. So maybe in another maybe we'll see just a third model, which is just like a thick Kjerag, in a future their future lineup. Because I know they're like a company that's about minimal like amounts of gear, but I could totally see a third model of like a thick Kjerag, existing in their lineup.
But yeah, overall, great midsole. Just in terms of shoes, I think that we've received, I think similar foam in the Brooks Catamount, similar
Yes.
foam in the Puma Nitro. That Puma Nitro is sweet. I've actually come around to it, and then I haven't tried it yet. Maybe, but I think the Skechers Hyperburst has this as well.
Yeah, so it's
I'm
a
not sure.
supercritical EVA. So it's not a plastic based super foam. It's an EVA, so it's foam, but they just inject it with a whole bunch of fancy air. It's usually nitrogen or something, and it's
Fancy
really
air.
yeah, it's really interesting. It gives the shoe very bouncy qualities, but it's very finicky. Like you have to get it just right. I don't know the ratios of air, because like the first Brooks Catamount, I feel like in my opinion, Brooks totally jacked up the durometer of the foam on that one. But for their second Catamount, they got it a lot closer. And I think who was I talking to? I was talking to someone at Nnormal. They didn't use a supercritical foam. They were testing out like super foams, like plastic based ones. And Killian thought that they were all too bouncy for the trail, which is literally what we've been saying this whole time. How super foams are a little bit too bouncy for mountain running. And Killian is in agreement with us, which is why he actually went for a supercritical EVA instead of a supercritical PBA or PBAX based midsole. So I'm glad that we're all on the same page with the greatest mountain runner of all time.
Just another reason why he's the GOAT. Even his
Yep.
recommendations are GOAT.
Yep. And, I think we don't really need to touch upon, we touch upon the outsole a little bit. Full length Vibram Mega Grip. One thing I think you and I were both saying is like, I think there were times when like the lugs could have maybe benefited from being a little bit longer, but like
My only rec.
there's like, the cost of that is like the weight of the shoe goes up, and like it perhaps doesn't work as well on some more mellow terrain. I have a feeling I would love to. Maybe one day we'll get Killian on a conversational pace and we can talk about some of these shoes a little bit more. I bet he tested out big lugged versions and ultimately opted against it. So I'm now realizing probably every decision of this shoe. I bet the alternate version that we're thinking of, I bet Killian already tested it out and deemed it to be worse for some reason. And he's probably right.
100%. I
So
guess my only thing there though is it's already so light to begin with that
mhm.
you could add more lug depth. Maybe it adds an ounce of weight, and it's still an 8.5, 9 ounce shoe.
Yeah, that is pretty amazing how it's so much lighter than some of its competitors that it could even afford to gain an entire ounce and still be lighter than most of its competitors. So I raced the Tusher 70K in it. Would I race in this shoe again? I actually absolutely would. There's a lot of shoes where I race in them and I'm like, I wouldn't do that again. I would race in this normal again. I would love to spend a little more time in this shoe and do some more racing in it. Would you race in it?
I think if I did, I would top out at 50K in this shoe. I think a better runner could go a lot longer. I'm sure of it. But yeah, this felt like a middle distance or less shoe for me. I just think the way the upper was constructed with a lot of that matrix material going down towards the toe box, it just created like comfortability, like slightly naggy comfortability issues long term the longer I was in the shoe. So I think at any distance, it would not be the first shoe that I go to.
Mm-hmm.
But the company's so damn cool. It's Killian, and I actually like the not flashy. Like we didn't even talk about the colorways and stuff, but I like how nondescript the shoe is. Like you really have to like peer in and be like, what are they wearing? Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm down with all of that. Just the personal fit wasn't great for me.
Yeah, and like the colorways and everything, that's from a sustainability standpoint, not using excess dyes in their fabric. It uses a whole lot less water, creates a lot less waste. So that's why all their shoes are black or white. I would pretty much stick to racing mountains in this shoe. I did some flatter runs in it, and like I'm not gonna race the Javelina 100 in this shoe like Dakota did, or Western states like Dakota did. Like it's too much running. And like while running in the shoe was totally fine, there's many other shoes out there that I would much rather go just running in. But for something like Tushers, where, you know, there was a lot of hiking, you know, I love hiking in a minimal, more flexible shoe, but then I also liked very much descending mountains in it and feeling like a parkour ninja in this shoe. Um, I'm pretty much sticking to those medium distance mountain races. But like on the other hand, like I'm not saying I'm going to do it, but I can understand how some of these people are running big mountain 100
For
milers
sure.
in this shoe. So
Yeah, I think if I had to compare it to another shoe, just to provide some more comparison, like I was directly comparing the shoe at all times to the Hoka Zinal 2. I think the Zinal 2 is about as light. I personally thought that the Zinal 2 was better on techie terrain because it had greater lug depth, and I liked the heel collar design too on that shoe just for easier entry. The one thing that the Kjerag has on it, in my opinion, is it's simply more cushioned underfoot, so theoretically it's better for longer distances.
yeah, see, I liked the Kjerag more than the Zinal on more technical terrain because of the added protection. In terms of the value, so this shoe's $195. I thought it was kind of expensive because the shoe is very, you know, it would be like going to your artisan bakery where they're like, we only use flour and water, and then getting a $25 loaf of bread. But then you go to the bakery and you're like, oh my gosh, these people figured out how to make, or it's like when you go to Italy to buy pizza. That might be an even better analogy where it's just like there's, you know, tomatoes and mozzarella and basil. And then you're like, this is the best pizza I've ever had. This Nnormal Kjerag only has like 4 ingredients. You know, it has an outsole, a midsole, and an upper. And for some reason, the ratio of all those ingredients baked like a perfect loaf of bread. And, you know, while there's not much going on there, I think that 195 for like getting the most premium of a few ingredients, I think it's fine. It's also a smaller company. Like it's a new company. Like we're in that sub $200 mark. And one thing I guess we could dive into a little bit going on to the value is I can actually see myself getting a ton of mileage out of this shoe.
Yeah, I'm in full agreement with everything you said. The only other thing I would add, and you probably know this, but maybe people in the audience don't. There's this thing called the left digit bias, where whatever number is on the far left of the number, you sort of base your purchasing decision by. And because this shoe is less than $200, I'm immediately seriously considering it because we're in that era of like everything good is over $200 these days.
Yeah. And, you know, we're not the first persons to release a Kjerag review. You know, this is going to be one of the more detailed and in-depth ones. I'll just say that. But one thing that
Shots
people have
fired.
had, yeah, I mean, I'm not calling out anyone. I'm just saying our reviews are very detailed because we run a lot. Like that's just one of the benefits of actually just going out and running a lot. Like we put a lot of miles on our shoes. Some people had said like, oh yeah, I already have 400, 500 miles on my Kjerag. And I was, before I had this shoe, I was like, you people are full of crap. Like you're just doing that because it's Normal's, you know, it's Killian's brand and you want to say you did. Now after having run like some pretty big mountain miles and how the shoe hasn't changed at all for me past mile 20, these people might be right. It might be one of those shoes that it's like, you know, I don't know, for lack of a better term, like it's already broken down, but the way that it is broken down is totally sustainable for a lot of running.
Yeah, and just so much shoe for so little weight. I think that was one of the taglines on their website, and I loved that because I think, yeah, per dollar you're getting so much shoe.
And especially kind of like, you know, Killian has dropped a lot of interviews about this shoe as well. And he said, you know, it's one of the most, he wanted to make a very versatile shoe. Like he has one racing shoe for all of his races. You know, he doesn't have a long mountain shoe or a short mountain shoe. He just races the Kjerag and everything. I would say perhaps like, I don't know, this will be the questions for the audience or just like rebuttal me with another shoe. I think the Nnormal Kjerag probably has the widest range of use cases of any shoe on the market right now. What do you think?
100%. I think it's especially true the better the runner you are. Although I find myself trapped in that logic because I think now that I think about it, almost the better runner you are, the more of any shoe you could probably run in and extend the use case
Yeah.
for.
Like, what were we saying? We were joking after the race. We were like, if you have perfect biomechanics and your feet don't ever get injured and you don't need any cushion, this is the best shoe in the world. No, I think it actually does check so many boxes. Like, if we're playing the like gun to your head, you can only pick one shoe for all of the training that you're doing. I would have to go back and see like what also checked, but like I could do pretty much everything that I'm training, for in this Chirac. And that brings a lot of value to the shoe. Is this one of the Swiss Army knives?
Yeah. Okay, I got one question for you because I don't think anybody knows the answer to this question better than you, at least anybody that's been in shoes in the 2010s. How does this compare to other brands when it comes to the V1 of a shoe?
Aside from the monstrosity of the sizing, this is one of the best, like not only V1s, but like first of the company shoes. Um, like this is one of the best company debuts of all time. I mean, if we're looking at some debuts from mountain companies in the last few years, we've got Nnormal Kjerag, Norda 001, which is probably up there. Speedland SLPDX. It was nifty, but I don't think it was anything to write home about. What was the other one that just what was it? What's the other expensive brand out there that we're missing?
Oh, gosh.
Oh, Naked TR.
Naked TR.
I think the Chirac debuted perhaps better than all those. The next second place, I think, might be the Norda.
Okay.
Yeah, and I just don't think there's not that many in like the recent generation of trail shoes that gets to be like first generation from a new brand. Even if we're looking like somewhat recent first generation from a brand that already made shoes, the only other one where I was like, oh, this is a fantastic first real trail shoe, the original Nike Kiger. But like Nike had already been making shoes for 30 years. But yeah, very impressive debut. I'm very excited to see more of Nnormal. This is a shoe I'm holding on to. I'm definitely going to keep running in it, like when I can. We still do have. I don't think there will ever be a time when we don't have a lot of shoes in the stable in terms of reviewing. But if there's ever a time when we've got a spare run, I think I'm going to throw this Chirac on a lot. If you do want to try out this shoe and your local run specialty shop doesn't have it, feel free to use our link below from our friends at Running Warehouse to get the Nnormal Chirac. Your purchase helps support the channel, allows us to continue to do reviews like this. But let us know in the comments if you have a pair of Chiracs, like what do you think of them? Or if you're running in something else and you're thinking, the Chirac might be one of the shoes to switch into, let us know. Just drop it in the comments. We're here to have those shoe conversations.